Hello and welcome everybody to the PondCast Podcast. This is your host Brody Bennett, and this is the podcast where we talk everything fishing and hunting related. I got a good episode for you this week. Episode number 2. I got my first guest on here, so it's a very exciting day. I hope you guys enjoy. Stay tuned towards the end. Listen all the way through, and I appreciate you. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a special guest today on the PondCast Podcast. He's a teammate of mine of a Western Michigan bass fishing team. He's an avid hunter, avid angler. Don't know too much more, but please welcome, he's a special guest, first special guest of the PondCast Podcast. Please welcome Austin Sherwood.
What's going on, man?
What's up, Austin? Thanks for joining me.
Hey, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Let's get right into it. Because I'm dying to hear the story, first of all. I've only heard bits and pieces from group chat. This buck that you shot, I want to know the deets on it. Because from what I've gathered, you've got some history with this buck, or no?
History as far as this year goes.
This year, so you saw him opening day?
Yep.
Opening day, and you're bow hunting?
Yeah, so the season started out, actually. I went out glassing before the season kicked off, so just before, and just did an observation sit.
Yep.
And this particular farm that I'm hunting, I've hunted for about 8 years now, about as long as I've been able to hunt by myself. I've been hunting this farm in Kalamazoo County, and I've only seen 3 mature deer on this farm in that 8-year period. One was in 2014, and that was just trail cam pictures. One was in 2016, and the most recent one, the one that I harvested this year, was in 2018. The pattern that goes with every other year is every other year this field has beans in it. So
they switch it out between beans and corn.
Exactly. Okay. And the years that we have corn do not seem to have mature deer around the farm.
How big is the area in which they have corn in, like the field?
It's a 80-acre field.
Yeah, so that's kind of set up how it is back home with me. Is we got this field, 80 acres corn, and you can't see anything in it because the deer, they'll just hide in there. So when it opens up to beans, those deer still come out to feed, and they're moving around. So you're set up kind of on the edge.
Yeah, so I have 3 spots on this farm that I can hunt. The tree stand I've been hunting is right on a little bit of a pinch point, and it's in the corner of the woods which come out to the bean field. And that's the spot that I've spent a majority of my time hunting this year. The first time that I saw this big buck, though, I was just doing that observation sit and was watching 5 little bucks, six total that day, 6 small deer, 1.5 year, 2.5-year-olds, just working the bean field. And then out of nowhere, I noticed just way down 200 yards away was this big bruiser, and he was just bedded down in the bean field right on the edge. So that I got to watch him until dark. I stayed there till well after dark, and the deer worked themselves out of the field. And I knew that was the target buck and the only deer that mattered to me all season. Right. That was the deer I was going to go after.
All right. And then, so when did you harvest this deer?
I harvested this deer on October 25th.
And that was 2 weekends ago, right?
Last Thursday.
Okay. So you went out there, you sat all day? Did you sit in the afternoon?
So I've been only hunting evening hunts in October. I really try to stay away from morning hunts. There's a lot of bedding area around me, and I do not want to risk blowing out a deer in the morning, especially when I'm targeting one specific mature deer. I know if I bump that deer out, it's over. I might as well find a new property to hunt. So I try to stay away from the morning hunts as much as I can. And just because also I'm hunting a food source. So with the open beans, those deer will work that throughout the night. And I don't want to go walking through the beans in the early morning while they're still out there. So try to let them get set up in the bedding area and just hunt them on the evenings.
And they come out of that bedding area in the feed, and that's what that deer did.
Exactly. So I've hunted quite a bit this year, but I've also tried to be pretty smart in where I hunt. As far as which stand I sit in. And a majority of the time, it's been just the same tree stand. Works pretty good with a north, south, or west wind. Really, it's not a bad spot at all. Had a lot of I've actually seen a buck every night that I've hunted this year, which is great.
Yeah.
There've just been a lot of immature deer, but I've ran into this bigger one 4 times this season, I believe. 4 times.
You've had 4 different encounters with the same deer.
Yes, 4 encounters with the same 11 pointer.
Never came in within bow range the 3 other times other than the night you harvested them.
No, not once. Actually, the closest that I got to him was about 100 yards. And he was out there. There was 3 other small bucks and a couple does in the field, and he got hung up at 100 yards. And I try with everything in me not to do a whole lot of calling in early October.
Yep.
I grunted at him once, got no response. Grunted again, got no response. And I just decided, okay, I'm going to shut up. If he comes, he comes. If he doesn't, he doesn't. And that day he did not. But yeah, I've had a lot of encounters, I would say, within a short period of time with this one deer.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've noticed, at least from when we hunting back home, where I mainly hunt, is for some reason, I don't know why, I don't know how to explain it, but it just seems like there's more bucks in general. Everybody's seeing more bucks this year. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it happens, because, it's a 50-50 shot whether it's going to happen every year, right?
Right.
And it just seems like everyone I've talked to, they've had encounters with multiple bucks at once, whether it's one big mature buck that's grouped in like a bachelor group with like 4 or 5 other bucks, but like yearlings or 2-year-olds. It's just really interesting to see that this year it just turned around. I don't know if it's a Michigan thing or it's a nationwide thing, but it just seems like, I don't know, it just doesn't happen very often that you get a bachelor group of 4 and 5 bucks, depending on where you're hunting, I guess. It depends. Do they do management around this property that you've been hunting? Like, is it like a known thing with your neighbors where, you guys kind of have a management program going on, or is it just, you get lucky sometimes?
Yeah, I wish that it was. I wish that I could say that it was. Unfortunately, a lot of the property around me, I only have one neighbor who hunts that I have contact with, that me and him both exchange information, and we both manage it that way, where we both are an understanding that we're not going to shoot a deer that's not a mature buck.
Right.
All of the other neighbors, though, it's absolutely not that way.
Opening day, guns blazing type deal.
Oh, yeah, it gets crazy. So I wish that we could manage them better than what we can, but with how many different properties surround this place, it's really difficult to manage it like that.
Yeah, it gets tough when you're in kind of those rural. I don't know how to explain it, because it's different strokes for different folks type deal.
Right.
Some people, they see the meat, they go out there, they shoot the first thing they see. That's their hunting season.
And that's fine.
Yeah, and that's completely fine. You're absolutely right. It's completely fine to do it that way. It just gets frustrating. It's just like bass fishing, right?
Yeah.
People go out and they catch bass or bluegill and they keep them, whereas anglers like ourselves, we compete, we fish kind of for the sport. Not to say that I only hunt for the sport of, going out and hunting. It's all about harvesting and doing that. But it is really rewarding when you can kind of see that management program flourish after a couple of years.
Oh, yeah. It's incredibly rewarding. And that's why with this property, like I mentioned, I've been hunting at 8 years, seen 3 mature deer. In the 8 years I've been hunting this property, I've never harvested a deer on this property once. Not ever. I actually shot my first turkey here. I shot a turkey this year on the same property. I've never actually harvested a deer here. And that just comes down to me personally not wanting to shoot an immature buck. And truthfully, I would have loved to take in does on this property. I've never seen a lot of does here. I mean, I'll see a little buck and I'll see a doe or 2 little bucks and a doe, but there's just not a huge amount of does walking around that I feel right harvesting one.
Right, exactly. So you're getting it mounted?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So
Got
absolutely. Yeah, so I'll dive into that a little bit. This buck, after all these encounters, it often happens where a mature deer will walk out that you've never seen before, and you'll have an opportunity to shoot it. But to have one in specific that you're targeting and one that you're hunting, it very, very rarely goes your way.
Right.
And I was getting to the point where I had seen this deer enough times that I'm starting to think it's just it's not going to go my way. This deer is going to vanish. Someone else is going to harvest them. Whatever's going to happen, I'm not going to be able to close the deal is kind of how I was starting to feel. Especially when you get into mid-October, the October lull, you start getting a little bit concerned. Is the rut going to take this deer to a completely different area? And then 2 days before I shot this deer, they went in and they took all the beans out of the field. So they cut the whole field. And at that point, I'm assuming, it's over for sure. Yep. But I got really fortunate, actually. The deer that I've been watching, he was coming out of a bedding zone. It's a complete funnel zone of the bedding area where it comes down straight into the field between two woodlots. Yep. So it's one path that they frequent between the bedding zone to the field in the evenings. And that's a spot I had watched him come out multiple times, but because of the way the wind has been all October, I did not want to go in there and risk it. The spot is straight to the east, so if we get a west wind at all, it's going to blow my scent right into the bedding zone, and I know I won't have a chance there. Mm-hmm. And so I struggled with that throughout the season, just not being able to hunt the spot that I really wanted to. And then we got that hunter's moon last week, and I do firmly believe that the 3 days before it and the 3 days after, you usually get a lot more daylight activity with mature deer. Mm-hmm. I believe this was the first day or second day after that peak moon, but we finally got an east wind, and there's a lot of things that added up to it. I pay a lot of attention to the wind and the pressure, weather, and it was 50 degrees that day as a high, which is it's about 10 degrees lower than the average for October 25th. And so that difference in average being a low difference, usually that's pretty helpful. Also, the pressure was up above 30. So when you get peaks in pressure like that, a lot of times it gets the deer on their feet. But then I also got that east wind, which I'm not certain it's the first east wind of October, but it is certainly the first east wind that I was hunting in October.
Right.
And
go ahead. You take those beans off. And another key factor in probably this, you mentioned they took the beans off a couple days before you went out that Thursday. You take those beans off, those deer are still going to be feeding. And that's a mistake I made the last weekend is I was out sitting, I was out early. Combine came in, they took the beans off, and instead of me sitting in that stand still hunting the beans, I got down and moved to a different spot, whereas I could have just stayed in the field because those deer will still feed those beans, that missed stuff that the combine doesn't pick up and throws all over the field. Yeah. Deer will still come in and pick that up before it goes bad.
Absolutely. There's a little bit of stubble left on the ground, and there's a lot of beans on the ground still. So there's definitely still deer feeding in that. And luckily that night, there was still those beans on the ground. With that east wind, that was the first chance I had to go hunt closer to this funnel zone. Mm-hmm. And so I decided for the first time that year to change spots, move in near that funnel zone, because I knew with the east wind, my wind was actually going to be pretty much perfect and they would not be able to get my scent there. That night, a 4-point walked out and started feeding in the beans, and I'm watching them work the field. And, it's a 4-point I've seen multiple times this year, so I didn't think a whole lot about it. What I didn't realize, though, was just how strong I think the rut has actually started in Michigan already.
Yeah.
I really believe it's came pretty early this year compared to normal years.
Right.
I don't know what factors all go into that. I know it's been a little bit cooler. We've had a lot of just steady cold weather in October compared to usual. But so I'm sitting there and watching this 4-point, and then all of a sudden I hear the trees over in this funnel zone just start to get shredded. It's just getting ripped up. It really sounded like someone was just taking a brush hog and driving through the bushes back there. And I didn't know for sure, but I was pretty quick to assume that was probably the Big 11 I'd been watching, tearing that up.
Yeah.
And it was then that I heard my first snort wheeze ever in the wild.
Really? That's interesting.
Yeah, I was pretty excited about that, but also I don't know if anything gets your heart jumping through your guts like a snort wheeze right there. So yeah, between the shredding of the trees, and I can't see the deer, but then I hear him snort wheeze real loud, and then a couple grunts, and I look and he just comes right out of the timber right there through that funnel zone and stands on the edge of the bean field. He's at about 80 yards at this point.
Yeah.
At that point, I didn't take very long to recognize that's a deer and didn't need to look at him anymore. So I try to self-film all of my hunts.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been filming every hunt this year with 2 cameras and been trying to really commit to the camera and make sure I'm doing a good job with that. This guy screwed that up pretty bad. I hit record when I saw him step out and then grabbed my bow. I quick ranged a spot where I thought he was going to come through because it was right in line with that 4-point, and I could tell this dude was pissed. I ranged a spot at 35 yards. I'm like, I think this is about where he's going to come through. I look back up at this 11-point, and he's in a full-on trot right at the 4-point. So no time whatsoever to move the camera onto him. I had to abandon that really quickly. He came into that spot right around the area that I ranged, and I had to pull back, and I grunt stopped him because he was on a mission going after that 4-point. Grunt stopped him, stopped and looked, and that was that right there. Smoked him, made a good clean shot, double lunged him, went about 100 yards in the field and fell down right there. So
yeah, you can't script that any better.
No, I've never danced in a bean field before, but that was a good time.
Partying hard.
Yeah.
No, it was an awesome buck, and you'll send me a picture of it, and I'll make sure to put it up here when people watch this video. I kind of want to get into college bass fishing. You're kind of more well-versed in college, the tournament fishing. You fished the MCBC, and this year I believe you fished the CBT, the College Bass Tour.
Yep.
A lot of the controversy, and I say controversy very lightly, going around in the competitive fishing industry is the integration of MLF this year, Major League Fishing. And that's kind of something we've experienced in the last year in the state of Michigan with the college bass fishing tournaments.
Right.
Kevin Van Dam and Mark Zona put together the College Bass Tour. They came in, they set up their own tournament series that travels around the state of Michigan. But the one that's been known for a while is the Michigan Bass Circuit. And that one was kind of introduced 7 years ago.
Yeah, I think it's been 6 or 7.
6 or 7. So they've kind of always held the reins. That was the circuit if you were going to fish College Bass Tour. You fished the CBT. You fished both circuits.
Yep.
And we're going to kind of tread some water lightly here because there's some well-known issues with certain tours.
Sure.
How did you feel the CBT was run for the first year?
The CBT in its first year was absolutely incredible, for a lack of better words. I personally felt that was the most organized, well-ran, just distributed as far as prizes and payouts. It was one of the best, if not the best, tournament series I've ever fished in my life.
Which is good.
They did
which
a
is
phenomenal
good, and it's
job.
something you want when you're getting young anglers, and I'm going to say young college kids.
Yeah.
But, you and myself, we can't afford to go out and fish the Elite Series. And especially we can't afford, whether it's work, whether it's school, whether you're doing both, you can't afford to travel around. You don't have the time to. But the CBT, and this was kind of my thing when I saw kind of the payout and layout of the whole tournament series, is it was worth my time. If I personally didn't fish it, but if I was going to fish it, I'd fish the CBT because it would be worth my time to travel.
Oh yeah, they make it absolutely worth your time, and not only just worth your time, but the way they schedule it is it's only 2 weekends of your summer, the regular season. So you'll have a tournament Saturday on one lake and a tournament Sunday on a totally different lake, and those are 2 different tournaments. They're individual tournaments.
Are the tournaments usually close together, so they usually pick one lake that's close to another lake and then just kind of flip-flop it?
Yeah, exactly. So you don't have to travel to two different spots of the state. You're going to go up to Alpena and you're going to fish two lakes in Alpena, one Saturday, one Sunday, and it's only one weekend of your whole summer that you have to really get off work, get the money for, and it makes it not only financially more doable, but time wise, work wise, just all the other things that we have to do, summer classes. It makes it really, really feasible to go out there and fish the college bass tour.
Is it two tournaments a weekend, or do you fish Saturday? Your weight from Saturday, does that carry over to Sunday? How's that work?
It is two individual tournaments. So if you go out Saturday and have a horrible day, you reset. It's Sunday's a totally new day, totally new tournament.
That's cool. So Kevin Van Dam and Mark Zona, they have sponsors like NASCAR drivers, right?
Right.
They got some of their sponsorships in on this tournament as well, and they gave away some cool prizes. What were some of the prizes that they gave away?
Yeah, that was one of the things that really blew me away is you do not have to do well to win prizes at this thing. There are raffles, giveaways, just such an incredible out just there's such a spread of prizes for everybody. I mean, I think and you don't even have to win a raffle. Everybody gets all these goodie bags of stuff. When you go out and when you come back, they have body armor drinks that are cold there for you. They're giving away Yetis. They're giving away just all Oakley sunglasses. I mean, everything you can think of. They have a smorgasbord of prizes there.
Is it something that you worry won't be sustainable, or do you think this will continue for years and years and years?
I think that because of the people that are behind it, it's absolutely sustainable. I think that with Mark Zona, Kevin Van Dam, DNR Sports, the sponsors that they have like Oakley and Yeti and just all these guys coming on board, I think it's absolutely sustainable. The way they run it is sustainable because it's only 2 weekends, like I said.
Right.
But the guys that are involved and the commitment that they have now from the anglers, I think makes it a long-term deal.
Is it the 2 weekends? Does that include the classic, or is classic totally different?
That does not include the classic. The
Okay.
classic is one more weekend in August.
And does everybody make the classic, or is it you have to fish 2 out of 4 tournaments? Do you have to fish one? Do you just not have to fish any to make the classic?
I believe it's 2 out of 4, maybe 3 out of 4. It's a number of tournaments you have to fish to qualify.
Now, how long have you been fishing with Western Michigan, tournament wise?
Western Michigan. So I've been, let's see, 5 years.
And what would you say? This is gonna be a good one. What would you say was the worst tournament you fished in those 5 years? Because I have one in my head. I already have one locked and loaded in my head. It will always stay there. It's ingrained in my head. What tournament is the worst? And I just want to see if it's the same one.
Uh, it comes down to two for me. It really does. Um, I had a horrible tournament out in Ohio on Indian Lake for an FLW. I had a worse tournament. Yeah, I gotta say the one that takes the cake is an MCBC Classic
Ooh.
where I had a really good bag of fish that did not make it
Mm. What happened
and
there?
would have. It's
Series of
I
unfortunate events.
yeah, I had a limit of fish that I'm very confident in would have been leading the classic uh, by a couple pounds. And we're doing MCBC TV, and we're had our limit in the boat, and we're fishing. We're doing stuff for MCBC TV, kind of just enjoying the rest of the tournament day.
Cruising. That's what
Yeah,
you're doing.
way too confident. I'll put it that way. Way too confident. And at a certain point, I joked to Shandon Miller, who was my partner at the time. I said, "Hey, I think we should make sure those fish aren't dead." And totally kidding. And he opens it up and he goes, "Oh yeah, they're dead." And I
Not
thought he was
kidding.
joking with me. Yeah, I'm like, dude, don't mess with me like that. He asked the camera guy, Miles. He goes, "Hey, Miles, how dead are these fish?" Miles goes, "Oh yeah, those are dead." Um, the rest of that day was like a funeral. It was bad.
Yeah, not just laughing that one off, because it sucks when you have whether you have one fish die or your whole live well die. Most of the times it's not necessarily even your fault.
Right.
Sometimes it's just the fish have just gone through so much, and
Yeah.
the worst tournament that I had in my head was a BC or MCBC tournament in Coldwater Lake. And that's the one that I thought you were going to say, because I remember running into you on the water with about an hour left, and I think you were fishing with Jared at the time.
Yeah.
And Jared's fishing one way, and Austin's fishing the other way. But what was unique about the situation is that Austin's rod and lure were going the opposite way that he was facing when he was fishing. The backwards cast.
The backwards cast.
You were mastering the old backwards cast.
I had to get it down. had some free time out there.
The other question I want to go on and ask you about is something I get asked a lot, is about how people get involved in college fishing, whether, or, like fishing tournaments, whether it's high school or it's college. For me, it was as simple as just reaching out to the president. What was your experience on getting onto the bass team?
Yeah, so when I joined Western's bass fishing team, there was only 8 guys on the team. In contrast, now we have over 20. I think we have like 24 guys. So it's grown a ton. I would say the big thing, though, was that when I first got started, I knew I wanted to do college bass fishing. That was a big thing for me going into it. And I reached out to Shandon Miller, who was the president at the time. And I said, hey, how do I get on the bass team? This is something I've always wanted to do. And I had to do an interview process with him. And I'll never forget, we met at a McDonald's. And I got drilled down with questions about, what are you going to do with this situation, this water temperature, blah, 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 blah. Went through the interview process. And at the end, he goes, all right, do you want to fish with me this year? And I was like, absolutely, dude.
He wasn't interviewing for you to get on the team. He was wondering if you'd be his partner. That's what it was.
Yeah, he's sneaky like that, man.
He didn't care whether or not you were going to make the team or not. That's funny.
I think that's it, because we've been best friends ever since. So it was awesome. It was a good interview, I guess.
As far as competing in the tournaments, there's no necessary requirements to just compete in a tournament other than having a boat, right?
Having a boat and then being a full-time student.
That's it.
Yeah.
And I know there's another club a little bit north of us in Kalamazoo, or in Mount Pleasant. We won't say the actual name because we don't speak of them.
Yeah.
But necessarily, the bass club's not necessarily tournament fishing. You don't have to be a tournament angler. You don't even have to fish tournaments to be part of the club. It's basically just a fishing club, correct?
Right. Yeah. I don't believe that most colleges don't have a club just for fishing unless it's that bass fishing club. And so by all means, guys who enjoy the outdoors, guys who want to learn more about fishing, joining the bass fishing team is a great way to do it. And you don't have to fish tournaments to learn a bunch.
Yeah, and you do learn a bunch. That's the thing that I've noticed, is you learn a lot constantly. Whenever you're talking to people like yourself, even Brennan, those are just people that they're out there every single day, every single weekend, every single tournament, nonstop learning it, and which is unique for new anglers to get into, and especially just if you're in college, and just finding people that share the common interests with you is pretty sweet.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And ask questions. I mean, you can't ever be too prideful to learn.
Right.
The best in the business are still learning every day. And so what I really hate to see is when young guys think that they're too good to ask questions or too good to bounce ideas off somebody, and they just continue to make the same mistakes. It's like, there are a bunch of guys out here willing to help, that want to all grow the sport, grow as anglers. They're willing to help you out. They're not going to give you their waypoints, but they'll tell you a good starting direction,
Yeah, that's always a funny joke I like throwing around, is running up to Brennan and be like, hey, Brennan, what was funny is, funny story talking about this, the St. Clair tournament. Brad and I were heading out to the St. Clair tournament, and Brad pulled up the Snapchat map just to look at it. And you see the exact point. Brennan's out there on his Snapchat. He had his phone on, his Snapchat map on. You could see exactly where it was. So Brad screenshot it and sent it to him. And next thing you know, 5 minutes later, Snapchat map was turned off for Brennan.
we got Bo Thomas on that once this year. We asked him, we're like, Bo, where you at? He goes, Detroit River. And we go, really? It says you're up in Anchor Bay.
That tournament was fun. I've never had so much fun on a tournament like that. Nah, I shouldn't say that. It was just different than every other tournament. It was famous Lake St. Clair. You know, unfortunately, we launched from the Detroit River. Did you guys make the trip up the river to St. Clair, or did you stay in the river?
No, I did not make the trip up to Lake St. Clair. I fished right in the mouth of Lake Erie. So
Okay.
Detroit River, mouth of Lake Erie in that area. That's usually if we fish a Detroit River tournament, I'm going to stay. I love Erie. I love fishing Erie. So I'm going to go as much into Erie as I can. Now there was a boundary on that, so I stayed in the mouth, but
Yeah. Where can people find you, Austin?
Sherwood Outdoors, I believe, is on everything. So on Instagram, it's Sherwood
You got
Outdoors.
Sherwood Outdoors on everything?
I think it's on everything.
Oh.
Sherwood_outdoors is pretty much the way to go. I mean, pretty much it's just Instagram anyways, or True Pursuit Outdoors is the other one. Yep, True Pursuit. That's TRU Pursuit _
Hey,
outdoors.
No free ads. Easy now. No free ads.
There's no E in it.
Austin, I appreciate it, man. Thanks for joining.
Hey, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, buddy.
Yeah, no problem. So that was Austin Sherwood. I hope you guys enjoyed it. It was a good interview. Glad to have him on. It was a lot of fun talking hunting, fishing, and all sorts of other things. Make sure you go follow him on Instagram and YouTube I think it's YouTube, maybe just Instagram, at Sherwood Outdoors. Also on Instagram at True Pursuit, no E in True. If you're looking to get involved, there's a lot of information here. If you're a college angler, you're a college student, if you want to get involved in a bass fishing club, usually it just entails just reaching out to your bass fishing club, whether it's your actual school one or it's just a local one. Get involved. There's nothing wrong with getting involved. There's no dues. There's no fees. Some you might, but I know for Western we have no fees. We have no dues other than do your part, which might entail you helping out at some charity things or sponsorship events, which is fine, which is if you're in the fishing industry, that's all things you need to learn as you're going through. If you're in high school and want to join a bass fishing team and your school doesn't have one, usually I believe it takes about 3 people to start a club. So if you and 2 other buddies that share the same passion want to start a club, you guys have every right to do so. Get involved. If your college doesn't have one, organize one. I'm sure you'd be surprised at how many people in your college would actually probably like a fishing or hunting club within the college. I don't think it might be a RSO, registered student organization. I'm not for sure. But I appreciate Austin again coming out, sharing some insight. I appreciate you guys for listening this whole time. I had a lot of good feedback from the last episode, so cranking these out once a week. I enjoy you. Make sure you're listening to this on SoundCloud.com/PondCast Podcast. You're watching this on YouTube.com/BBennettFishes. And you follow along with myself, yours truly, at BBennettFishes on Instagram. I appreciate you guys. Hope you stay tuned for next week's episode and hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure you leave a comment or a like wherever you're listening on SoundCloud or YouTube. And we'll see you next week. Thank you.